Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on the 5 On Cast, your sometimes and more recently, always every week source for insights into whatever I happen to care about at the time. I am your eternal, ever burning co host, Patrick Downs. Some may call me the modern Johnny Blaze. And today I am joined by Armand Farrokh, director of the SMB, SDR, and AE teams at Carta. I've titled today's episode, The Leadership is Not a Joke Soncast. And this one's going to be about identifying, nurturing like a mama bird, and activating new leaders from scratch in a revenue org. Welcome to the show, Armand. Do you want to add some color to your introduction?
Boom, boom. I got it. And by the way, I got a weird name. So I'll just tell you right now, it's Armand. So not Armand, but people get that all the time. That's okay, man. People get it all the time. We had a guy named Bilal on our team. Everyone calls him Bilal. So I've been there, man. By background, I don't like it when people go super long. So here's my 30 seconds on me. I sold insurance for 2 years. I ran a startup for 2 years. I worked in venture capital for 2 years. Then I came to Carta. I was an AE for, call it, about a year, did 225% of my number. Then I ran an SDR org of 30, and they said, take what you're doing, multiply it across 30 SDRs. And today, now I oversee all of SDR and SMB sales. So call it about 20 SDRs and 20 SMB AEs and 4 managers.
Wow, that is quite the shift.
It's been a
pretty
ride,
quickly
man.
as well. I saw that you had a background though in leadership. It looks like you were an entrepreneur for some amount of time. Looks like you were a leader right out of college as well, and then you went into Carta, kind of from the ground up. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was. Carta was the perfect trisection of different pieces of my background. What you learn in a startup is you learn to you've got to survive every day. You've got to eat what you kill. And so people are like, when I was first coming to Carta, they were saying, you don't have any sales experience. And I'm like, one, I sold insurance, and that was 10 times harder than the job that I was stepping into, which was selling SaaS. And then two, literally I sold every single deal that we ever sold at our startup, and we had a 10K check size plus. And so learning that autonomy and that ability to structure your day on your own terms without a boss telling you what to do made it so that regardless of the structure that I came into at Carta, I was able to structure my day and be super hungry and get after it. And for that reason, I was very successful at it.
Amazing, man. So let's get even more personal here. I like to set a little vibe at the beginning of the show for us to get to know each other. So I got 3 questions for you. I'm going to pop right into it. Okay. What is the one thing that bothers you most about yourself?
The one thing that bothers me the most about myself. I get really frustrated with tiny things. So for example, anytime I need to install a new software on my computer, like I get really bad at filling out forms. I was refinancing a mortgage the other day, and they were asking me for all these documents, and I kept accidentally deleting documents and missing stuff. And so I'm really bad at tiny processes in the minutia. And so for that reason, I hire a virtual assistant to take care of as much of that stuff as possible, or I ask my co-host Nick to do most of that stuff because he knows I'm just screaming at my computer. It drives me crazy because I think I'm pretty capable in most things in life, but there are these very tiny processes that I just can't wrap my head around, and I'm very bad at them.
Dude, I do the same thing, and I feel like I have endless situations where that's happened. What is the biggest weird little mess up that's happened because of a tiny thing you've missed?
Oh man, we were trying to do our accounting, so we invest in real estate on the side. So we do the podcast, we invest in real estate, and we're both in sales, Nick and I, and I was trying to fix our accounting, and I was just really bad at it, and I didn't know how to use QuickBooks. And so it got to the end of the year taxes, and our CPA looked at us, and she was literally like, I don't know how you've survived this long. Literally all of your numbers are wrong. And we had to pay several $1,000s to have somebody fix it all. And I was so mad because before that I had spent probably at least 12 hours working on our accounting. And so I learned that you need to outsource things that you suck at.
I've had that fear since I was a kid because I've sucked at those little things my entire life. And I was like, what happens if I mess up all the numbers in my taxes?
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for bearing your soul on that one, man. To bear your soul even more, when's the last time you cried and why was it?
Oh my God, man. I wish you primed me with these questions before. And you purposely said, I'm not going to prime you because I want to hear your live reaction. So this is
Mm-hmm.
going to sound really, really sad and depressing. But I haven't cried from anything like personal or work related in a while, just because I guess there hasn't been anything crazy traumatic in my life recently. The last time that I cried was I woke up from a dream where uh, I had passed away, and my mom was crying at my funeral, which is really morbid. Like, sorry, you probably weren't expecting that, but I'm a huge colossal mama's boy, and anytime I think about anything regarding my mortality or her mortality, I just like try to push it out of my head because it makes me really sad. I still talk to my mom every week, and I'm a grown ass adult, and I run a big team, but that always tends to be a soft spot for me.
Shout outs to all the moms listening. This is now the
There we go.
Moms Cast. I love it, man. That's wonderful. And
Right
to,
on.
to round it out, what is something that happened recently that made you feel optimistic about humanity?
Optimistic about humanity. Well, it's been really, really hard to be optimistic about humanity recently. I think in general, so we've had some folks on the podcast recently, and so we run a show called 30 Minutes to President's Club. It's a super successful show, and every once in a while I'll get someone reaching out to me saying like, hey, like here was a copy of an email that I used from episode 4 on your podcast, and it helped me book 4 more meetings. And then like 4 or 5 or 6 of those will pop out of the woodworks, and it's like these there's some people in like crazy places. Like there's like some guy in like they're in like the boonies in the middle of nowhere. There's like a guy in like the UK who's listening to the show, and like it's crazy because all these people are like shouting us out and they're telling us real stories. And like I always got really frustrated when I came to Carta because when I first started, there weren't a ton of reps who were like owning their professional development, in my opinion. um, and I thought this was just a thing in sales, but it made me feel really good that like people are like choosing to own their own professional development, and like they're seeing success, and like that made me feel really good, like that even though like all this crap is happening in the world right now, like the only thing you can count on in your life is trying to advance yourself professionally, and like that's something that I've tried to do my whole life, and it was really cool to see that stuff come together. So there you go.
I think that's leadership in general, right? Is feeling better about being able to influence others, whether it be through actual leadership in a company or thought leadership, like what you and Nick are doing with the podcast. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's the best feeling in the world. And if that's something that connects with you, that becomes the mission, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. All right. Well, speaking of leadership, and I didn't even prepare that transition. It's just really working out right now for some reason. To set, at the very least, a dangerously shaky foundation for this conversation, what are your general thoughts on how specifically the tech sales industry selects, promotes, nurtures, again, like a baby bird, and activates leaders today?
Yeah. So general thoughts on it is it's really hard. It's a very bizarre way that we go about leadership selection today. And here's why sales is a little bit backwards compared to other industries. So I used to work in corporate strategy and venture capital, and the natural path up is you go from analyst to associate to senior associate to manager to senior manager to director, etc. moving forward. The only way that you move forward is by being able to lead and run teams, right? And your skills as an IC in more salary based fields or quantitative fields are really like you have your skills as an IC, and then what gets you to that next role is your ability to help other people get there. What's interesting about sales is you can actually make more money as an IC for the rest of your life than you can in leadership. And so that's the type of personality that we attract. And then we make the mistake of picking the Michael Jordan, who is a phenomenal sales rep, and making them the sales leader, when that's actually oftentimes one of the worst possible things that you can do. Okay. And I'm happy to talk about some of the things you need to look out for, because sometimes that is the best thing that you can do. But most of the time, it's the wrong decision.
Yeah, there's a couple ways to bring in a leader. There's one, like you said, taking somebody from within, and it's usually the person that's the Michael Jordan of the team. Or what happens is they bring in somebody from the outside, a lot of the times not even from the same industry, but might have like leadership experience, and then try to slot them into the team. Like
Mm-hmm.
out of those two options, what is your personal preference if you're trying to fill a spot for leadership?
Yeah, it's all about where is the culture of the team today and where do you want it to be. And so, for example, when I first took over the SDR team, a team at Carta, the team was 30 SDRs, churning a ton, compensation issues, cultural issues, massive issues left and right. And we had some like SDR manager attrition, and there weren't really like strong fundamentals of what it meant to be an SDR. No idea like what a cold call should sound like, what activity metrics should sound like. And so if I promote someone within in that organization, all they're doing is taking all of the bad habits that they've learned here and continuing to propagate them, right? And so the first hire that I had made was an external hire, and I knew what best SDR best practices were, and I wanted to infuse some new culture and new talent into the team, right? And he ended up being one of my best managers. But now the team is operating like a freaking whiz. Like it is a killer team. They're so good. And so now what I'm going to optimize for is I want somebody who can take the tribal knowledge of Carta and tell me how I accelerate this thing and show me things that I don't know about my own business because you're in it and I'm not. And so now on the SDR side, I optimize for internal leaders.
And when you're looking for someone that can do that, do you hope that they've demonstrated to you before and shown you something that you didn't see and help you implement?
And so some people are like, oh, that's political, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. The biggest thing for me is before you go into that next job, you should already be doing that next job. And so the best promotions in the world. So when I took on this SDR leader position, I had already mentored 7 SDRs on the team. I had already created my own playbooks on cold calling for myself and shared them with our VP of sales and shared them with some other people. So they knew that I knew what I was doing and why I was successful. And when I've picked SDR managers in the past, they had already put together competitive playbooks for our team. They had already put together cold calling sessions for our team. They had already taken 3 other SDRs under the wing. And so it was a no-brainer because I knew they already had the support of everyone around them. And I knew that they were doing work that was helping me be a better manager too. And so it was like a shoo-in for them. And that's how it should be, is you should not rely on the roll of the dice, whether that's being a manager or being an AE. It should be abundantly clear that it's you 6 months prior to you going into that role.
For anybody listening to just the audio, when you started speaking, my head almost fell out of my neck. I was agreeing so hard, non-verbally. It's so true. I mean, that's how I demonstrated my success in my role. I just did it. I just started training and mentoring people. And I've seen so many times you've taken the Michael Jordan, and then even worse, you don't even have leadership training. I mean, how rare is it that any tech sales company has like a full leadership training program? It's really rare. Is that anything you've run into?
Yeah, it's very rare. What's really interesting is we are so over-indexed on rep training, right? There are a million cold call playbooks. There are a million cold email and discovery playbooks and various things of that sort. There's very little sales manager training. And I think part of that is just because you don't hire sales managers as often. So it's a little bit less of a regimented process. And when I was bringing on my 2 first external sales managers, SDR managers, I went and created 7 or 8 decks on operating principles that we have within the team. And it was really focused less on like how we cold call and things like that, because I was going to give them the SDR training. So that's the first step, is I want to train them like they're a rep. And then the second step is I train them on how to coach. What is our cadence? What are the types of questions you need to be asking? What is the relationship that we seek to develop with our reps? And we need to align from a moral standpoint and from a coaching standpoint, principally, so that if I give you a problem to go solve, you're operating within those principles today. The antithesis of that is what usually happens is you hire somebody, you don't really do any training, you try to delegate something to them, and then what ends up happening is you guys are operating on different sets of operating principles, and so they'll go and do the job in a way that's completely different from how you would do it, and you think it's their fault, but in reality it's yours because you haven't level set at the beginning.
I love that. What is an example of an operating principle that you guys follow?
Yeah. And so, for example, one thing that I talk about when we're coaching reps, right, is my philosophy when you're coaching reps is before you start to hit them with the stick or do this or do that, the first thing you need to do is understand people's goals. Okay. And you need to double down on your investment in them. And so write everybody's goals down, know their personal goals, know their financial goals, all that stuff, and then tie those goals to where they would want to be in life. Okay. And then that gives you the right to get behind them and push them fast towards those goals, which tie back to their day-to-day. Okay. And so a lot of people come in, they just think this is broken, this is broken, this is broken. Seek first to understand. right? If I tell you to go like work with these 3 or 4 reps and you come back and you just start like whipping the stick, now I have the right to tell you like, hey, we talked about this first. You haven't won that trust yet with the team.
That's 100% true. And I mean, that's even just on like a manager to rep level. There's, I think, an even bigger divide when you're going from manager to director and you become a people manager of other managers. That's a very different skill set. I'm curious, what kind of coaching and nurturing did you get from your executive leadership when you made that transition?
Yeah. What was interesting is I honestly, I'm really thankful that I had my VP of sales who's been a huge supporter of me. I didn't get much per specific training on managing managers. And what's weird in my specific role is I went from AE to managing managers. And so I actually skipped the manager layer. Now I was doing some of that stuff when I was an AE. And then when I was managing managers, I had some ICs under me. And so I got to learn real time managing people and managing managers. Plus I had done it at my startup in the past, but that was a little bit of trial by fire. And then what I did is I sought out different mentors at the company and I watched how my VP of sales worked with me and my peers. And I watched how those mentors worked with their directs and their peers. And I tried to start piecing those different things together. I had also had experience from working in strategy and venture with some really, really smart folks who knew how to manage managers back then. And I was taking notes the whole time so that when it was my turn, I would go out and be able to do it myself.
Do you wish you had any other sort of support at that point, or do you feel like that was perfect for you in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, you always want more. And so a lot of people don't know where the sales podcast actually came from in the first place. So the reason that we started 30 Minutes President's Club is I knew that the only way that I was going to be better and make sure that I don't outgrow my organization is if I'm constantly taking outside people's perspectives and outside leaders' perspectives and pulling them in. And so our chief HR officer at the time said, hey, you're not going to get all the mentorship in the world out of any company, let alone Carta. And so go every single week, reach out to your most highly coveted sales leader and buy them coffee, right? COVID hit, blah, blah, blah. I did a couple of those chats and I was like, these are really good, but I don't have anything to give. And like, honestly, I feel like I could share these lessons with someone else. So why don't I do this? Why don't I just like flip on a recording and like put some structure around the show and turn that professional development activity into a podcast? And honestly, it's pretty freaking entertaining if we put some structure around it. And I can attract some of the best sales leaders out there by doing that. And that's how the podcast started out. It's like I was seeking out my own professional development and my network, and it turned into something much bigger than I thought it would ever be.
Yeah, that's the only reason I started a podcast was to talk to people like you that have done it before. And I've learned more from these interviews than I don't even know the audience might have. Like I'm picking people and topics that I want to know about. Is that how you also select?
Yeah, I mean, we really focus on actionable tactics for reps. And so I try to make sure that it's actionable for our audience and we sort of cover all the big areas from prospecting to disco to et cetera. But selfishly, before and after the interview, I'm able to ask these guys a lot of questions about how they run their team before we get into the interview. So I get to know them a little bit better. And I mean, with KD, Kevin Dorsey, killer sales leader, phenomenal sales leader. I mean, I talked to him a lot about the way he runs his team. And just from those quick 15 to 30-minute interactions, you learn a lot about how good leaders do it.
Yeah, big shout out to Katie. I've interviewed him twice, and I think I learned more in that hour of time speaking to him than I have in most of my training anywhere. He's unbelievable.
Totally.
So just to kind of cap this off, what are some things that people can be doing on their own, maybe outside of mentorship or training, to prepare themselves for leadership, whether that be like resources online, paid or unpaid? Is there anything you would suggest to those people?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple books that I recommend. I think one that I'm reading right now that's particularly phenomenal is called High Output Management. It's by the previous CEO of Intel. And it's a phenomenal book around how you leverage your team and stay on top of your team without being a micromanager. And it specifically talks about that example in how you run a breakfast kitchen in the first chapter. And it uses that breakfast kitchen analogy to talk about how you manage your chefs and how you manage, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's some really, really strong managerial principles that hit on a lot of the big pitfalls of a poor manager that typically a poor manager is going to run into on day one. And then the other thing that I would suggest is there are so many different podcasts out there. There are ones like this one that you're listening to. There are so many books. There are so many articles you can go and leverage. Every single day, find 15 minutes to own your professional development. The moment I wake up, I'm reading. I read for 15 to 30 minutes every single day. And if you do that over the next 5 years, that stuff compounds and you're going to cash out way earlier than everyone else. And then the last thing, and we already hit on this once, is go start doing something outside of your job role at your job, and don't wait for your manager to ask for you to do it.
I would underline that exclamation point, just like circle, 100% agree. And that's a great place to leave off, man. Is there anything that you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, man, I've mentioned it a couple times, but one, you can find me at on LinkedIn. So Armand Farrokh, there's only one of me. I sort of have a funny name. And then the last thing is go check out 30 Minutes to President's Club. It's an awesome podcast that's more focused on the actionable sales tactics for reps. And the last thing, this will come out of date at some point, but I am hiring SDRs at Carta right now. We have a killer team here. So if you are an SDR or a prospective SDR looking for a gig, come and reach out to me.
Please do that. The latest episode with Morgan Ingram and John Barrows is awesome, by the way. So cool. Definitely check out that episode. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. This has been the 5 On Cast. Please follow us on everything. I am desperate for followers. I'm standing in the field, waving my arms around. Instagram. We're getting on TikTok, what have you, YouTube. I don't know. I'll find another channel just so you can follow me on it. But I really hope you guys are having an awesome day. You're beautiful. Don't ever change, and I will see you again soon. Bye.